Hello, my name is Rex, and this is going to be my review of Godzilla King of the Monsters, otherwise known as Gojira or Godzilla. So, I'm going to be talking about the Japanese and the American versions in this video, and just so you know, there's two things I want to go over just real quick. One is that on this channel, my goal is to pretty much review every Godzilla movie, so I'm going to try to do that. I think it would be really cool to be able to review every single Godzilla movie before the next one comes out, so I don't know if I'll be able to do that or not, but I'm going to try. And the second thing you should know is that this isn't going to be like a really nuanced review. This isn't like obviously a professional review or anything like that. I'm a fan of Godzilla. Godzilla is my favorite franchise in the world. I was introduced to it when I was a little kid. I was born in 1985, and I think Godzilla 1985, I mean, it's the first Godzilla film that I can remember, and to this day, it's still my favorite. I think I prefer the Japanese version, The Return of Godzilla, but we'll get to 84 and 85 when we get there. I just want to focus on the original Godzilla movie and the American version today. But I felt like before I get into that, I should just let you know up front that I'm not going to be like heavily critiquing, heavily going into every detail of the plot. And I'm probably not even going to edit this. I'm probably just going to gush about how much I love the movies and then upload. I have not seen every movie, so there will be some. In fact, I've never seen Godzilla Raids again, and I think that's the next film. So, there will be some that are new to me, but it's my favorite franchise. These are going to be very biased reviews, and I'll just leave it at that. This is coming from a fan, so don't expect me to really have a lot of negative to say. Although it could get interesting. Who knows? But as far as the first Godzilla movie, I'm trying to think of when it was the first time I ever saw Godzilla, the original, and I do know that I never saw the original Gojira until like maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, somewhere probably around like 2018 to 2020 was the first time I ever saw the Japanese version. I grew up with the original Godzilla King of the Monsters. I'm pretty sure I saw that in the early 90s for the first time. And I've always thought it's great. And I've always known that, it's probably, it is the most important film in the franchise. It's probably still to this day the most meaningful film in the franchise. There could be some debates, I think, but at the same time, I just don't know. I don't know how you could really make the argument that any other film. You might say like, oh, this reboot saved the franchise and brought it back. Or you might say this film made the most money, or this film was seen by the most people. But I just think the OG is, overall in general, the most meaningful film in the franchise. It's one of the most grounded. It's one of my favorite. This is definitely in my top 3 favorite Godzilla films, along with, obviously, The Return of Godzilla, and another one that we'll get to way later. But yeah, I love this film. I just watched the original Godzilla just maybe a 2 or 3, 4 weeks ago. Not long ago, I watched it. So before I sat down to record this, I actually, this may be a sin to some people that are fans, but I watched the American version because I hadn't seen the American version in so many years. Once I got the original version, like maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, which I'm 40, so I was probably around 30 when I saw Godzilla King of the Monsters. Godzilla, the original Gojira. And since then, I've pretty much only watched the original. So this is my first time watching the Raymond Burr American version in a long, long time. Probably, 20 years. And I wrote down some notes. I hope you don't mind. So you might see me look at these notes. And I'm just going to go ahead and go in. I'm sorry for the super long intro, but this is probably going to be the first video I upload on my channel unless I make a video about what I'm doing here. But anyway, I want to start by getting the comparisons out of the way. I like both films between Gojira and Godzilla King of the Monsters, but I think that obviously the Japanese version is superior in almost every way. I think that the relationship is so much more fleshed out with Emiko, Ogata, and Sarazawa, and I'll get to that a little bit later, but I guess I should be more general right now. The Japanese characters and the storylines of the original film, and also the messaging around nuclear bombs and nuclear testing, is just so much stronger. Like all of it, it has so much more depth to it, and I therefore my opinion is that the Japanese version is superior. However, as I rewatched the American version tonight, I really caught myself several times appreciating how clever they were with the way that they put Raymond Burr into these scenes. Both films. I'll start with the opening, right? So the Japanese version opens with the fishing boat being attacked by Godzilla, and it's just like so immediate. And I think it's a great opening because it starts off with this music playing, and everybody's having a great time on this fishing boat, and there's dancing, and just it's so joyful, and then it just immediately goes to shit. And Godzilla murders everyone on board, and it's horrifying. And I think I think that was just like a great shock opener for the original. I also think that the opening for the American version is really good as well. The way that they kind of treat the movie as more of a flashback in the American version, they start after the attack on Tokyo, which is, I think there's 4 attacks in the film. I think there's an attack, if you don't include the attacks on ships, right, out at sea. There's the attack on Odo Island, and then Godzilla appears on Odo Island briefly. Then there's an attack in the harbor in Japan, and then the attack on Tokyo. And in the American version, the way that they shoot Raymond Burr, waking up after the final attack in Tokyo and being injured, and then the way that they use these scenes with him and extras, and they recreate the sets almost enough to where I remember not being able to tell the differences until people smartened me up to it. I just really think that the American version was brilliant for that. Like the way that they slid Raymond Burr into the film and into these scenes was great. And also, I think that Raymond Burr's performance in the opening is incredible. The way he sells his injuries, and the kind of opening speech that he gives, the opening dialogue, I think is extremely well done. It's kind of funny, and I hate to jump ahead, but maybe you guys know about Raymond Burr's dialogue at the end of Godzilla 1985, and that was amazing. And I just found his speech at the end, in the ending scene of Godzilla 1985, to be so powerful, and maybe a little bit profound. I'm probably exaggerating, but I really liked it. I think his opening here was great, which is funny because his ending is just 2 lines and then they cut, which I thought, I was kind of shocked by that. The American version is definitely really jarring in terms of pacing. But both openings were strong, and the way that they shoot the scenes with Raymond Burr, and the story excuses that they have for him not interacting with other characters, when he first arrives in Japan, he's supposed to meet Dr. Sarazawa, but instead an assistant of Dr. Sarazawa, an assistant, shows up and talks to Raymond Burr, and then a police officer, police chief, whatever, interviews him, because while Raymond Burr was flying to Tokyo, while he was in the air, in the water below them was the ship being attacked. And so they use this, and I think it's really clever, to pull Raymond Burr away from the cast of the original film and kind of have him with the police and have him with the press, and he's a member of the press in the film, and so they're kind of observing the film. In most of the scenes, Raymond Burr is off to the side with others, and he has somebody translating to him what's being said, which is wildly inaccurate at almost all the time, and it's crazy now that I know the differences. And I'm sorry I'm rambling about this so much, but I just saw the American version again after so many years, and I was really, really just caught off guard by so many things. But I have to say, I think Raymond Burr did a fantastic job as Steve Martin. I believe that was his name, Steve Martin. And I think that they were so creative in the ways that they inserted him into scenes, and the way that they had him as basically like the narrator for the film. And I think that the price that you pay for that, though, because, obviously you're adding something in, you're taking something out. And what you kind of lose is you lose the depth of the characters, the depth of the theme of the film, especially dealing with like the nuclear bombs and nuclear testing. And, the relationship. There was one line, and I know I'm all over the place, and I'm sorry. But there was one line that really struck me early in the film. In the Japanese version, there is a love triangle kind of going on where there's an arranged marriage between Dr. Serizawa and a character named Emiko. And Emiko and Serizawa, they've known each other since childhood. This has been arranged like their whole lives pretty much. There might be some details I get wrong or some names I pronounce wrong, and I apologize for that. You can, obviously correct me in the comments. But she is in love with a character named Ogata. He's in love with her. And so, during the Japanese film, there's this constant tension of, is she going to tell Dr. Serizawa about her and Ogata, being in love, wanting to get married, wanting to be together? What about the arranged marriage? How is Dr. Serizawa going to react to this news? And the way it all builds up, and then the resolution to it at the end is brilliant. It's so, so good. And there's so much emotion in all of it, especially with Dr. Serizawa's experiments with the oxygen destroyer, and his agonizing decision of whether or not he's going to use the oxygen destroyer. And in the Japanese film, it's all treated so serious, and the acting is so good, the dialogue is so good. It's just well done from beginning to end. It's very heavy. It takes itself very seriously, but it's performed and written very well. So it never comes off like it's trying too hard, or corny or disconnected, or hard to believe or hard to empathize with. It never comes off disingenuous or anything like that. In the American version, all of these elements, it's just a shell of itself, all of it. So that's kind of what you lose by adding in Raymond Burr and doing the scenes with him. And I'm not going to tell you how to feel about that, but you still have the overall story. You still have the overall, Godzilla attacking. The overall narrative is preserved pretty well, but I will say pacing is just like brutalized in the American version, and losing so much of the emotional connection to the Japanese characters is also really, really tough. But I'm glad both versions exist. I enjoy both versions, but I do think the Japanese one is superior. Let me see. I'm not following my notes at all, by the way. I just kind of started a stream of consciousness like rant, and I'm sorry about that. Let me talk a little bit about the suit. So one thing that kind of caught me off guard going back and watching the original film and watching this one again, the American version again, I really like Godzilla's suit in this film. I like the suit more than I remember liking it. Now, I don't know. I think they used one suit, and I don't know what else they used, because like there's one scene, and you probably remember this because he looks so goofy in this scene where he appears at Odo Island the second time. Is it Oda Island or Odo? See, I forgot. I think it's Odo Island, but regardless, the second time that he appears and he looks over the mountainside, it looks like somebody like using a sock puppet or something. It looks so goofy. But for the most part, I was actually really impressed with the way that Godzilla looks in this film. I think that the way that they build him up, it's almost like Jaws, like there were these shark attacks in the Jaws films. before you actually get into like seeing the shark, and you see Bruce, or I think that's what they called the shark in Jaws. I think his name on set was Bruce, but before you see the shark appear and start killing people, there's just like these attacks, and you don't really see the shark much. They kind of do this thing with Godzilla where there's this long build up where he attacks the ships and you don't see him. You see the breath spray on the ships, but you don't see him doing it. Like, I just think a lot of that is brilliant for building up suspense. The music is perfect too. I think the soundtrack for Godzilla or Gojira is so fucking good. It is excellent all the way through, especially the somber music that plays at the end with Dr. Serizawa's sacrifice. And you know that this soundtrack is iconic when, I don't know, how many movies have there been now? Like, what is it, like 35 or 40 Godzilla films? Hold up, I'm actually going to look it up. How many live action Godzilla? My keyboard just like literally died on me. That's crazy. Let's just not worry about it. There's a lot of Godzilla movies, right? And they still use the original iconic music. That's how you know how good. I can't believe my keyboard did that. That's how you know how good the original soundtrack is for that film. That to this day, this was 1954. To this day, they still use the same music or variations of it, and I can understand why, because it's so good. I just let me see, what else did I want to say? Oh yeah, I was talking about his appearance. I think that the way that they shoot Godzilla, especially during the attacks, a lot of it is low, like the tail dragging, the legs like stomping through buildings, shots looking up at him from a distance at night. It's already in black and white. So a lot of the imperfections of his suit, I think, are like kind of covered by the like way that it's shot, the angles, the fact that it's in black and white. And I really liked it. In several scenes, I really liked the way Godzilla looks in this film. And there's only a couple of angles where like I felt like his face looked really goofy, or like his eyes or whatever, or some other animatronic wasn't really working for me. But for the most part, especially during the Tokyo attack, which by the way, I didn't time it, but it felt like that went on for like 20 minutes. And I think it does. I think it goes on for somewhere between like 18 and 23 minutes. And man, that was all incredible. I will say there's two scenes they should have definitely left out, where it's like two fire trucks crash, and they use basically toys. They use like toy cars, and you know what, they do that, with these like little miniature sets, and they try to shoot it to make it look like it's like actual size and being destroyed. They do it in some scenes, and I think for the most part they do it fine, like but it's shot well enough, and you can still like kind of suspend your disbelief. But man, when these two fire trucks crash during the Tokyo attack, it's just like watching a toy being tossed across a room. I don't know why they even left it in. It was just funny to me. I'm actually kind of glad they're in the film now, because the thing about it is, like, the film is so good. Like, there's some films that are so good that are I don't know what else to say other than they're so good, Like, I really feel like I got to step up my vocabulary if I'm going to review, like, 50 Godzilla films or whatever. But there's some films that are so good that the flaws in them kind of become, like, an inside joke almost. They don't even really hurt the score. Like, the film is still a 10 out of 10. You take the good with the bad. You love it as is. I kind of feel like, Gojira is kind of like that, where it's like those scenes are so goofy and they're so bad, and I don't know why they left them in the film, but like now I'm just glad they're in there, because I can laugh at them and then I can be pulled right back into the movie because the film is that good. I also really wanted to say that I think the way that the oxygen destroyer is introduced is fucking terrifying. Something about like that violin noise. I think it's a violin playing, but that audio that plays and then the way that it's shot and Emiko's face, incredible acting by that girl in that scene. The way that she sells it, because they don't show you the oxygen destroyer killing all the fish. They just show you her face as she's watching. It's done so well, and it's incredible. Um, Let me see. What else did I have up here? Uh, you get the first train attack. Like that's become like an iconic thing, hasn't it? That in most of these movies, maybe not most of them, but in a lot of these Godzilla films, especially probably with like reboots and stuff, there'll be a train coming and Godzilla steps on it or grabs it with his hand or bites it or whatever. And it was really cool to kind of remind myself that started in the original film. Love that. Um, Let's see. I thought his roars were incredible. The audio in this movie was really, really good. I thought Godzilla's roars were sounded great, and I think they add so much because like there are so many scenes where you don't see Godzilla. You just hear like the low kind of grumble, low growl of his voice, and then you hear the roar. And I just think it's so effective, and I think it still is to this day one of the most effective things about those films. During the entire Tokyo attack, I thought that Raymond Burr, this is in the American version, obviously, I thought his commentary during the Tokyo attack, even though it does kind of, again, the Japanese version is superior, you don't really need commentary. It's just the horror of it. I remember that scene with the mother holding her, I think she's holding her three children, looking up as Godzilla's approaching, and I think she says something to them in Japanese along the lines of, don't worry, we're going to be with daddy soon. And it's just like, you don't need any commentary, but it is what it is. And I think the commentary that Raymond Burr provided for the Tokyo attack was superb. I thought he did such a good job with that. He was so descriptive. And for what it's worth, even if it's not necessarily better, I felt like he did an amazing job. So I wanted to mention that. I also like the clock tower scene in the Tokyo attack. Because it kind of shows that Godzilla is not necessarily a monster. It shows that animalistic side of him. He's stomping through the city and a clock tower goes off, and he kind of gets annoyed by it. He doesn't know what it is, and there's the clock is ringing. It's like midnight or 1 a.m. or whatever time it was, and the clock is like the bells going off at the church or whatever building this is. And he just gets so annoyed. He starts biting at it and almost like bucking at it like he's gonna like punch it. And I just thought that was so cool, and I think that like showed a little bit of personality. I just think it's a really interesting creative decision that they did that they had him stop in the middle of his attack, get distracted by this bell, and almost be like, hey man, fuck you, and he ends up like attacking it and destroying it and stuff. But I think it showed like a different side of him, that he's not just like this evil monster. There's like a almost an innocence to him. Almost like an innocence, animalistic, even in the destruction, there's kind of a pureness there, not necessarily malice, maybe. I don't know. It gives you a little something to think about if you want to think about it, and I think that's great. And, funny enough, I do think Raymond Burr comes back in Godzilla 1985 and elaborates on that a little bit more. What else? The scene where Serizawa makes I've already covered, he shows Emiko the oxygen destroyer. When Emiko confesses to Ogata about the existence of the oxygen destroyer, and they go to see Dr. Serizawa to convince him that they need to use it on Godzilla. One, it's one of the things that's not the way it's done in the American version is like, Steve Martin, Raymond Burr's American character, kind of says a couple of words to Emiko about how, like, we need to use it. She almost unprovoked confesses to Raymond Burr that it even exists. It's like her deepest secret, really, other than her relationship with Ogata. Anyway, I didn't like the way it was done in the American version, to be honest with you. I really felt like that was a little I didn't, I don't know if they struggled with alternative plans with how they would handle that scene. So it's not like I judge the American film too harshly for that, but the way it's handled in the Japanese film is amazing. She goes to see Dr. Serizawa with Ogata, and everything about that scene. This is after the big attack on Tokyo, and Dr. Serizawa is wrestling with, you know, he even kind of directly says it in the Japanese version, which this is almost completely left out of the American version, if not completely left out. But he talks about how if he reveals to the world that he's discovered this new technology that can be weaponized, that everybody will want access to this new weapon, and they'll do whatever it takes to use it, And even when Emiko and Ogata, I think they try to tell him that, you don't have to or whatever. But Dr. Serizawa knows that he'll be forced to, once the powerful governments and the powerful people in the world know that this technology exists, that this weapon exists, they will force him to work on it. They'll torture him. They'll threaten his family, and I don't think he spells all of it out, but he does talk about it. And you could just see him wrestling with it, and he's just torn apart because, I don't think his decision to sacrifice his life was made during the dive or just before the dive. I think it's really in that scene where, Ogata and Emiko are confronting him about the oxygen destroyer and telling him they need to use it against Godzilla and trying to convince him. It's that moment where he knows that, he's dead. He's either going to use this oxygen destroyer and then he's going to have to die, and so that the secret of it dies with him, because he destroys all of his research, which is a powerful scene as well, when he's burning his research papers in front of Emiko and Ogata. But then he also knows that, he's going to be forced to make this for, the Japanese government, the American government. Like, somebody's going to kidnap him, threaten him, torture him, pay him, whatever. They're going to do whatever it takes to get him, as long as he's alive, the oxygen destroyer is alive, and he can't allow that. So I think it's like right in that scene, he knows that he's dead. He either has to die now and take the secret, to his grave without using it, or he can use it and then give his life. And he decides to use it and give his life underwater. And that scene with the music that plays during that scene, it's so somber, it's just perfect. And overall, I really just wanted to say that I love this film. I've already said Godzilla is my favorite franchise, but man, like I've watched these movies so many times. I've probably watched, Godzilla films in total hundreds of times since I was just a little kid, introduced to these films. Probably when I was like 3 or 4 years old, I was introduced to Godzilla. And, this is the one that started it all. And I love the fact that the first one is just such an all-time classic. I think it's one of the most important films ever made. I'm pretty sure it's I think it placed like in the top 20 or the top 30 of like Time's list of like the most 100 influential films of all time. I don't know. Somebody quote unquote important made a list of the most 100, like the top 100 influential films of all time. And I know Gojira's in there, and it deserves to be, man. It's such a heavy, emotional, somehow grounded film. And even though it's a monster movie, and I think that's what makes it work. And I think that, funny enough, I've watched Godzilla as a franchise lose its way so many times, lose itself and find itself. And it's funny to see, because it was from the very first film, they got it right. They got the sauce in the very first film. It was a human story. I know that a lot of times, and we'll get to the American films at some point later. We'll get to the American films. I know we always talk about how, like, I hate these human characters. I don't care about any of these human characters. I just want to see Godzilla. But I think that the best films in the franchise are really when you do care about the human characters, when they build this, you know, heavy, dramatic, powerful narrative around the human characters, you know, being confronted by Godzilla. And he's like this, you know, antagonizing, overwhelming force, forcing them to, you know, confront, you know, death, mortality, fear, humanity, you know, and all these other things. And this first film just got it right. It just got it absolutely right. And this video is too long, and I'm sorry, it's 30 minutes in. I will be back soon to, I think the next film is Godzilla Raids Again. Let me just look on my phone real quick. Second Godzilla film ever made. I have never seen Godzilla Raids Again. Yeah, 1955. So 1 year later, Godzilla Raids Again. I've heard that it's terrible. And by that, I just mean I've seen YouTube thumbnails where they're like, this is the worst movie in the franchise. But I don't actually know. So I will watch that soon, and I'll be back, and I'll let you know what I think of. That'll be the first time I've seen a Godzilla movie that I've never seen here on this channel. And then we're just going to keep going. We're just going to keep going all the way until the next Godzilla film releases. Man. So, anyway, see you guys soon, and I hope you like this video.